Good evening. Hello, my name is Don Duncan. I am the California Director of Americans for Safe Access, and thank you for joining us tonight for this live Google Hangout. We're here tonight to talk about the California Citizen Lobby Day that's coming up in just 5 days right here in Sacramento. We're broadcasting live from our Capitol office, just a few blocks from the Capitol building. And I'm here tonight with Yami Bolanos from Los Angeles and Rich Miller from right here in Sacramento. They're going to talk to you in just a little bit later. And I want to say, if you have not yet registered for the California Citizen Lobby Day, it's time to do it. We're going to turn off registration on Thursday. And so you need to get registered for the California Citizen Lobby Day before Thursday. If you're wondering where to go, that web address is californiacitizenlobbyday.org, all one word, californiacitizenlobbyday.org. This is going to be the biggest and most important Citizen Lobby Day in California yet. We're going to be taking 300 or more people to the state capitol on Monday, June the 15th, and we're going to be talking to our lawmakers about medical cannabis, about more than a dozen bills that impact every single aspect of medical cannabis. We've got bills that deal with commercial licensing and regulation of medical cannabis. We've got bills that deal with concentrates of cannabis and the penalties for manufacturing those, which is going to be a big deal in California. We're talking about cultivation and environmental standards around that. We're talking about patients' rights, which is really something that's central to our mission here at Americans for Safe Access. The rights of patients for return of property that's wrongfully confiscated by law enforcement, for equal access to health care. People are really impacted by that here in California, and for due process in the courts. And so we're going to talk about all of those bills. And so tonight I'm going to talk with you a little bit about what's going to happen at Lobby Day when you come here. And so let me give you a quick overview of what's going to happen. And again, I want to emphasize you should be registering right now at californiacitizenlobbyday.org. On Sunday, June the 14th, we're all going to meet over at the Library Galleria. That's on I Street here in downtown Sacramento, a beautiful venue, and we're going to have some workshops. What we're doing on Sunday is really important for local advocacy because while state work is very important, the state and the local campaigns are connected together. And so on Sunday, we're going to talk about how to regulate the cultivation of medical cannabis, which is a very important topic in California right now. Counties and cities all over the state are banning or thinking about banning cultivation of medical cannabis. And there are ways to deal with the environmental impacts and the safety issues surrounding medical cannabis cultivation. And so we're going to talk to you in great detail about the science and the policy of regulating medical cannabis cultivation. That's going to start at 1:30 on Sunday at the conference. Kristen Nevedal, who is the director of our patient-focused certification program, is going to give a really great presentation about that. And then I'm going to talk to participants about using the local voter initiative process in the effort to secure safe access in cities and counties all over the state. And so if your city or county does not have regulations or has a ban, you need to be a part of that workshop to talk about what you can do in your city or your county to overturn a ban, to adopt regulations, and to get ready for the regulated environment of medical cannabis. That's going to be really important because as we move into the phase where the state legislature is licensing collectors and cooperatives, local approval is going to be very, very important. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit later. We're also going to spend about an hour on Sunday talking about the regulatory bills, two bills in particular, AB 266 by Assemblymember Bonta and SB 643, which is by Senator McGuire. These two bills will seek to create a statewide licensing and regulatory framework, and they are very controversial. They're very complicated, and there's a lot of misinformation and I think ambivalence about these bills. And so I want you to come to Sacramento and talk with me at the end of Sunday's session, the last hour of those sessions, about these two bills, what they say, what they don't say, and what improvements we want to make sure that California adopts sensible regulations for commercial medical cannabis activity this year. And here's why that's important. We've discovered in our research and in our experience over the last few years that regulations for medical cannabis, when they work, preserve safe and affordable and legal access to medical cannabis for patients. And so that's very, very important. But what they also do is reduce crime and complaints in communities, which means you have less opposition and less impetus for bans and for police crackdowns in your community. So that in itself is very important. But it's also very important when we're talking about statewide regulations that the federal government knows that California has a effective regulatory model that is well enforced. That's the criteria that the Department of Justice is using right now to set enforcement guidelines in the United States. And so it's really important that California step up to the level of other states that already have effective licensing and regulation models. And finally, it's important that we have state licensing to expand access in California. There are numerous cities around the state of California, especially in southern, eastern, and rural counties and areas that are reluctant to adopt regulations for medical cannabis because they simply don't know what's legal under the state law. And I am very confident, based on the experience of the last 10 years in California, that if we adopt a state licensing and regulation program, that cities and counties, some of them, where it's possible, will come on board and start to license medical cannabis operations inside their borders, whether that be the city or the county. And so whether it's a matter of preserving access, reducing complaints and crime around dispensaries, protecting us against federal interference, or expanding access, it is time in California for regulations for medical cannabis. But there's one more thing to think about in the timing of this, as we're looking at our local ordinances and our state regulations, is that we're coming up on an important vote. A vote in California on legalizing cannabis for adult use in November of 2016. We don't know yet what that initiative is going to look like. But what we do know is that voters are very likely to go to the polls and vote on something in 2016 that fundamentally changes the rules about cannabis in California. And the best possible position for patients to be in that scenario is to have a well-regulated system in place in California for medical cannabis. We don't want to go into 2016 as what our opponents and certain media outlets and people around the country are referring to as the wild, wild west. We want to have a well-regulated system so we know what the ground rules are for medical cannabis before we go to legalization. In the state of Colorado, where there was a well-regulated medical program in place before marijuana was legalized for adult use, what we saw was a peaceful coexistence of the cannabis and the medical cannabis worlds. They exist side by side. Patients get their medicine, their needs are met, and the recreational or the adult use market is still flourishing there. In other places like Washington and Oregon, where the medical cannabis program was less well regulated, we've seen a bit of a train wreck for medical cannabis patients. We've seen rights eroded. We've seen patients giving up ground and conceding rights they had previously in order to facilitate the adult use market. And we don't want to see that in California. We don't want to give up 1 inch of ground for medical cannabis patients when cannabis is legalized for responsible adult use. And so the best way we can do that is to firmly and clearly regulate and draw very clear boundaries for medical cannabis this year in California. Every year up until now, we've said to ourselves, well, if we don't get it this year, we'll get it next year, but we're out of next year's. And so I really want to encourage everyone to get behind the effort to regulate medical cannabis and to be pragmatic and reasonable in what it is we can accomplish in the state legislature, because we will not get every single thing we want, but we can get a lot if we all stand together and we push together to change the laws in California. And so that last hour on Sunday is specifically dedicated to us talking as a community, as allies and constituents about what we want to see in state regulations here in the state of California. So I'm really excited about that hour. And then on Monday, we're going to be back bright and early at the Library Galleria on I Street in downtown Sacramento. We have 4 hours set aside for lobbyist training. We're going to train you how to talk to your lawmakers. We're going to brief you on the bills. We're going to give you some very important pieces of paperwork. We're going to give you fact sheets about the bills. And this year, all of those fact sheets are going to have a place for you to add your own personalized comments to the fact sheet so that this is indeed your visit with your lawmaker to express your opinions. We're also going to give you some background information on your lawmakers, on your senator, and on your assembly member, so that you know what their priorities are, what committees they sit on, and who their primary campaign contributors are, because that's important in understanding the political landscape that you're operating in. So once you're briefed and trained, we're all going to go together down to the Capitol for a photo opportunity on the steps of the Capitol building, and then off to meetings at your assembly member and your senator's office. You're not going to go by yourself. You're going to go with everybody who lives in your district, and you're all going to have a chance to talk to your representatives or to their staff members about the bills. And we're going to tell you specifically which bills are pending in the Senate and the Assembly, so you know exactly what to talk about. And we're going to tell you if you're a assembly member or your senator is an author of any of those bills. So you'll know everything you need to know to have an informed and important conversation with your lawmakers. Now, some of you are saying, well, I don't want to do it. I don't want to go to my assembly office or my senator and talk. And that's okay, because numbers matter. And if you want to go along and just be in the group and be there to show your support, that matters too. We want to see 300 or more people at the state capitol and every single legislative office in the state. So if you haven't done it, please get registered for the California Citizen Lobby Day in Sacramento, because we need you there to make that big impression and make a big splash. This is what cannabis and other causes do in Sacramento. They bring people, they make a showing. It's a show of strength and a show of force. And if we want to be treated like labor unions, like teachers, like environmentalists and other causes, we need to make this big showing of support at this strategic moment in California. So I really want to encourage you to come out and be a part of that and make a difference in California. It's 5 days away, and advanced registration will close Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific. So I really need you to get online tonight or tomorrow and get registered, so I have time to make an appointment for you with your California State Assembly member or your senator. So that's a short recap of what we're doing. There's some other fun stuff too, by the way. Those are the main things. We're gonna get educated on Sunday. We're gonna talk about the bills, and then we're gonna go get briefed and lobby our representatives on Monday. Also, by the way, there's a comedy show, and so if you're coming to Sacramento from out of town and you're looking for something fun to do on Sunday night, I want to invite you to join us at Momo's in Sacramento, where medical cannabis personality, comedian, and journalist Ngayo Bilam will MC a comedy show for us. And there's also a really great VIP reception on Monday night. After the lobby day, when all the work is done, I want you guys to come join us at the Citizen Hotel, and we're going to have hors d'oeuvres, complimentary hors d'oeuvres. We'll have a cash bar, and we're also going to be joined by several California lawmakers who are part of the effort to protect patients' rights in California. And we're going to give them awards for sponsoring bills that are beneficial to patients. This is a great time to meet your lawmakers, to network with other activists, to check in and debrief about the lobby day. And you might win a prize. When you come to the VIP reception on Monday night, we're going to be raffling off some vape pens. So if you do your lobby days and you turn in your survey forms and you turn in your feedback forms from the lobby day, you might win a free vape pen when you're at the VIP reception. So you're going to have some fun. You're going to meet some great people, and you might walk away with a great prize. And so I really want to encourage everyone to plan to be there on Sunday at 1 and to stay through the reception on Monday night. It's a really important event, and I promise you, when you finish this, you're going to make a difference, and you're going to feel 10 feet tall. And so get involved and do that. And the first step is to go to CaliforniaCitizenLobbyDay.org and get registered for this event. We need your home address. That's why registration is so important, because we need to make an appointment for you with your assembly member and your senator to talk about these bills. So that's a really important step. Now, we're asking for a $25 donation for Lobby Day, but nobody will be turned away for lack of funds. If you want to come on Sunday, the workshops are $15 each, or $25 for both. And so I want to encourage everyone to go ahead and buy both of those workshops to learn about cultivation and regulation, and then also learn about the local initiative process. It's really information that people usually pay a lot more for, and that you need to turn the tide of bans and bad regulations around the state of California. So come be a part of that, and let's see what we can do together to turn that tide at the local level. We're going to talk a little bit more about why it's important to be involved at the local level and to get an ordinance adopted in your city or county in just a minute. But before we do that, I want to talk about a bill that is perhaps the most important in California for me, and I think for many people around the state, and that is AB 258. AB 258 is the Medical Cannabis Organ Transplant Act, authored by Assemblymember Mark Levine from San Rafael and sponsored by Americans for Safe Access. Most people don't know in California that if you use medical cannabis, you can be dropped off the National Organ Transplant wait list. And indeed, one member of Americans for Safe Access has already died, having been dropped off of the organ transplant wait list. And many others are in jeopardy right now. And this bill is going to put a stop to that. It's going to say that no doctor, hospital, or transplant center in the state of California can deny you an organ transplant based on your legal use of medical cannabis. This issue impacts about 1,100 people a year in the state of California. And that's may not sound like a lot on a statewide level, but for those 1,100 people, this is a potentially life-threatening form of discrimination. And so we're going to be talking to lawmakers, and I'm leading off with that bill tonight because last year, we were plugging this bill. We were shopping it around, and we were talking to lawmakers and looking for an author. And two women from Marin County went into Mark Levine's office and dropped off a fact sheet, just a simple piece of paper. You're going to get a lot of these on lobby day that talk about bills and why we want to adopt them and encourage lawmakers to support them. And they just dropped it off and left it there and said, hey, you should get behind this bill. And almost a year later, Mark Levine's staff contacted me and said, hey, these two women came last year and they talked about this organ transplant thing. What's going on? And from that, we were able to author a bill, get it introduced, and it's on its way to being adopted in the state legislature right now so that medical cannabis patients who need an organ transplant will not die. And that is genuine grassroots activism at work. That would not have happened through paid lobbyists or through a media campaign. That only happened because constituents went to see their lawmakers and made it happen. And so one of the most important things we're going to be lobbying for right now, when you get to Sacramento on Monday, June the 15th, is to pass AB 258 and see to it that patients have a fair chance in the organ transplant process. And so I want to introduce right now someone who's personally impacted by this bill, a friend of mine. She's a patient operator of Pure Life Collective in Los Angeles. She is also the founder and president of the Greater Los Angeles Collective Alliance, which is the nation's oldest and biggest, California's oldest and biggest medical cannabis industry advocacy organization down in Los Angeles. And Yami has been a part of shepherding the city of Los Angeles through some very chaotic days and into a sense of order. And so Yami, would you tell folks a little bit about why AB 258 is important for you and what's happening with that bill?
Of course. AB 258 is very important to me because it potentially can save my life. Tomorrow we go in front of the Senate Health Committee and for a vote, and I'm going to go testify in support of it. Medical marijuana gave me back the quality of life. And if I were to reject the liver that I've had for 18 years already, today I die because I won't test clean for another 30 days and I'll never make it another 30 days. It's very sad to me that the thing, medical marijuana, that gave me back the quality of life would also be the reason that I die if I were to reject the liver that I have now. So this bill would change that. It's a very unfair thing that's going on. People are dying left and right, and even doctors are, recommending medical marijuana because it works. It works. And so I urge you to please come and help us support this bill. And hopefully tomorrow we get a victory. And so you guys will come and make sure that we have a victory on the full floor.
Thanks for mentioning that, Yami. I forgot to say up front that tomorrow, AB 258 is in the Senate Health Committee. Every bill that's introduced in the state legislature goes first to a policy committee and then to a floor vote in the House of its origin, at the Assembly or the Senate, and then it switches. And so we've already been through the Assembly, and now we're in the Senate, and we're going to a policy committee hearing tomorrow to get approval by the committee, and you have to be approved by the committee if you're going to move on to a floor vote. And so that's what Yami is doing here tonight, is she's here to testify tomorrow at that Senate Health Committee hearing. So thank you for doing that. She's come a long way to do it.
I want to thank ASA for the effort they put into this. They've saved my life, potentially, and I thank ASA for that.
I see a question just popped up on the screen, and I hope you guys will bear with me on these questions. They roll by really fast, but someone says, I'm new to the movement and looking to learn more. I can't come to lobby day. That's too bad, but wanted to learn more about the bans And patients and providers, do you know where I can find out more information? And the answer is yes. You can look, first of all, at americansforsafeaccess.org and go to the California section to learn about some of the cities and counties that have bans or ordinances. I also want to encourage you to get signed up in the California Campaign for Safe Access on our email discussion list. That's where a lot of information is offered, and there's a lot of debate about ordinances, about bans, initiatives, and that sort of thing. And so that would be a primary point where you can get more information. If you can't get to Lobby Day, we are going to send out on Monday morning, June the 15th, an action alert for everybody around the state who's not at Lobby Day, so that you can be involved in the effort that day to influence what's happening with medical cannabis in the state legislature. So even if you can't get here, and I hope you will, but if you can't, you'll still have a role to play. So I want to briefly mention some other things that are happening in the state legislature besides AB 258, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the patients' rights bills that are happening. There's a bill about vaporizers, that's SB 140 by Senator Mark Leno, a champion of cannabis. This bill, however, would restrict where and to whom vaporizers can be sold and where they can be used. The bill's primarily aimed at e-cigarettes and smoking tobacco, but unfortunately it's very broadly worded, and it would also apply to electronic vaporizers and vape pens that people use for cannabis. We don't have a position on that bill, but that's one of the topics that's on the table coming up here in Sacramento. There's a bill that would loosen the requirements for evidence handling and retention for cannabis and medical cannabis cases. So police departments don't have to keep so much evidence if they're prosecuting someone. We don't like that bill, and we're opposing it because we feel like the existing laws are sufficient. There's also an asset forfeiture bill on the table, SB 443 by Senator Mitchell. SB 443 would require that the state obtain a conviction against somebody who's cultivating medical cannabis or otherwise accused of a medical cannabis-related crime before the state can move for forfeiture or for reimbursement of expenses. And so a lot of people don't know in the state of California right now that being busted on a criminal offense related to cannabis or medical cannabis is only the first part of your problem. There's also a process for forfeiting your property and taking it without due process, and then billing you for the cost of prosecuting you to take your property. And so this bill would prevent that. So there are important things happening there as well with medical cannabis. There are cultivation bills like SB 165 by Senator Monning that would increase penalties for cultivating medical cannabis and cannabis on both private and public property. That bill is very concerning to us because we don't want patients caught up in that enforcement mechanism. AB 243 by Assemblymember Wood establishes some very severe limits and registration requirements on cultivation. We're concerned about that. We've also got 3 different bills in the state legislature that deal with manufacturing concentrates of cannabis. Primarily here, we're talking about honey oil or butane hash. This is oil, honey oil and hash oil that's made with volatile solvents like butane. And as you know, or probably know, many people have started fires or had blowups by manufacturing this. And so we need sensible regulations about where and how it can be manufactured. But these bills tend to increase penalties and rely on that to deter conduct. And at ASA, we just don't think that increasing penalties is a very good way to protect public safety. And so we're calling on lawmakers, instead of increasing penalties with these 3 bills, to instead find a way to incorporate the regulation of butane hash and its manufacturing into a broader regulatory scheme. I see a question just popped up. Why can't cannabis be available for everyone, not just some? And that's a very, very good question. And the answer, of course, is that because under federal and state law, cannabis is illegal. And so there's an incremental process that we're involved in of, first of all, protecting medical cannabis patients. And the legalizing of medical cannabis is not a means unto an end, but if it also facilitates the ultimate legalization of cannabis for adult use, that's probably a good thing in our society, because nobody should be in jail for using cannabis. Now, having said that, ASA's mission is only medical cannabis. We are only working to protect and expand the rights of patients and to protect them from prosecution. But it's really important that we move that ball far down the court before California votes on legalizing cannabis for adult use. The worst case scenario, I think, for the legalization effort is that we have a situation where medical cannabis is perceived as out of control when voters go to the polls in 2016, and they don't think we're ready for legalization because medical cannabis is still this wild, wild west perception. I don't find that perception as real, but I find that that's a very real, very common perception I find around the state. And so I really think if we're going to make progress on the broader drug policy reform issues, we really need to finish the unfinished business of medical cannabis here in California. Finally, of the bills that are on the table, we have regulatory bills. 2 regulatory bills have survived the process. There's AB 266, the principal author is Assemblymember Bonta, and SB 643, the principal author is Senator McGuire. And these 2 bills seek to regulate medical cannabis at the state level. They want to issue licenses and adopt regulations and have state regulatory bodies for commercial activity. Now, first of all, both of these bills exempt individual patients and primary caregivers who are serving 5 or fewer patients from the requirement to have a license or be regulated. And so this is not about regulating individual patient cultivators. It's about regulating commercial activity. And so both of these bills would seek to do that through different agencies. And of course, at Lobby Day, we'll dig into the minutia of the agencies and the regulations and what have you. But the primary difference in these 2 bills right now is that the McGuire bill, SB 643, has a relatively simple licensing scheme that doesn't rely on a lot of details and leaves a lot up to regulators. Whereas the Bonta bill, AB 266, has a very complicated multi-tiered licensing scheme that seeks to prevent people from having multiple licenses. And that's going to be a problem for the existing industry in California. We do not want a situation where people who have been operating in good faith as medical cannabis providers in California are somehow squeezed out by a complicated and Byzantine licensing system. And so we're working with the authors of both bills to correct those problems and make sure these bills work for medical cannabis patients, for the industry, and for people who are joining the industry in California. And so we have a lot of work to do in improving these bills, and that's one of the really important things that's going to happen in the Lobby Day, is that we've got to take a bill like this, 52 pages for AB 266, and make it clear for lawmakers and accessible to constituents so that we can get the amendments we need. And there's still time for that. There's still time to get those amendments here in California, because all of the bills have crossed over now. June 5th was the deadline for Assembly bills to go to the Senate and for Senate bills to go to the Assembly. And so now they've crossed over, and we're going to have 1 or more policy hearings on every bill. We're going to have an appropriations hearing on most of the bills and a floor vote. So we're going to get 3 or 4 chances to amend these bills. And so it's so important between now and the end of August that you are speaking up to your lawmakers, whether it's at Lobby Day or otherwise, about what you want to see in regulations in the state of California. And I want to caution you about this, because people sometimes think that, oh, lobbyists have it under control. Lobbyists have, they're going to handle all of this, and they don't have it under control. Research conducted by the Congressional Management Foundation shows that undecided lawmakers are 6 times more likely to be influenced by a visit from a constituent than they are to be influenced by a visit from a paid lobbyist. And so you might be the most powerful voice in Sacramento when it comes to amending one of these bills to make it right for you and for other stakeholders in California. And I also want to remind you that if you don't talk to your lawmakers about medical cannabis, and you don't talk to them about the issues that are important to you, somebody will. If you don't do it, somebody will. It will be law enforcement. It'll be paid lobbyists for industry who may or may not have your best interest in heart. It'll be special interest group. It'll be religious organizations and other groups that are ambivalent about medical cannabis or worried about it. And so you have to be at the table. We don't get the privilege of being silent right now in California. What we really need to do is to stake out our place at the table and demand that we be heard. And the lobby day is a part of that. Action alerts are part of that. And you taking that initiative of yourself to be a citizen advocate and a spokesperson is really important. And so even if you can't come to lobby day, I hope you go to our webpage, safeaccessnow.org, and check out in the advocacy section our online citizen advocate training center. It's free. It's got video and printed materials for you to go through and learn how to be an informed, effective advocate for medical cannabis. Because remember, if you're not doing it, someone else will, and they may or may not be doing what you want. Now, we've come to about 30 minutes. I want to encourage you, if you're joining us through the Google platform, if you have any questions you'd like to ask or comments you'd like to make, go ahead and type those in now, because we'll be wrapping this broadcast up relatively soon. So using the chat box on the side of your screen, it looks like a little quotation box coming out from your head. Go ahead and type in your comments there, and we'll get to as many of those as we have time. So I also want to recognize here a great helper with a California Citizen Lobby Day, Rich Miller, who is also active with our Sacramento ASA chapter. And I want to acknowledge the fact that Sacramento ASA has really stepped up to the plate to provide us with a lot of volunteer help for this event. So Rich, thank you for doing that.
No problem.
Thanks for being on tonight. Tell us about Sacramento ASA and what you guys are going to be up to help promote this event.
Well, we're out canvassing all patients, going to all collectives, trying to get as many patients as possible to attend this. It's very important that patients come out. Their voices need to be heard. That's what makes a difference with policymakers. Those people that can't come out should contact their legislators, send letters. But as far as Sacramento ACE is concerned, we're just trying to do our part to make sure our voices are heard here.
Great. Well, it's so important. And, you know, you guys have a very unique position in the state, because in order to participate in state politics, you don't have to go anywhere.
That's
The
right.
Capitol's right down the street. And so I remember when I lived in Los Angeles, Sacramento seemed a million miles away. So it's really great to be here and to be a part of it. And thank you so much for doing this. And Rich was out just this afternoon before this broadcast passing out flyers and getting the word out about this event. And so if you're in Sacramento, if you're watching from nearby, there are probably flyers at your local dispensary, and that's probably because of Rich. So thanks for that work.
And
So
Yami.
and Yami, yes, Yami also out there beating the pavement to make it happen. So that's a short overview of the bills. I know it's complicated. You know, I've never seen a situation in California where we have so many bills on the table at one time. Regulatory bills, concentrate bills, patients' rights, cultivation. There's a lot going on and a lot of details. And so I guess in wrapping up my comments tonight, I would say this. There are some bills we simply can't live with. There are other bills we love, like the organ transplant bill. And then there's most bills in the middle. And in the legislative process, I want to encourage everyone to be engaged and to be practical and to be persistent. We cannot afford to step aside, as I said. We also have to be practical. We're not going to get every single thing we want in a regulatory bill this year. There are many stakeholders in Sacramento, law enforcement, cities and counties that are a powerful lobby, organized labor. They're all participating. They're all looking for something in the process, and that means not every stakeholder gets every single thing they want. It's like a giant poker game here in Sacramento, and there's strategy and people jockey for position, and we get everything we can get for patients. But I want to encourage you to be practical about what we can get. Even if a bill is not perfect, it may be better than nothing. And then when I say be persistent, what I mean is this. This process is a long one. Americans for Safe Access has been working on state regulations and legislation since 2008, and it's 2015 right now. So we've been doing this for a long time. And I know many of you around the state have been working on local ordinances and cities and county ordinances for a long time too. And the fact is, you just keep at it. Yami and I worked for 10 years to adopt regulations in the city of Los Angeles, and we're still not finished. There's still work to be done there to perfect that regulatory model. And so if you're engaged and you're practical and you're persistent in this politics, whether it be the local and the state level, you're going to make a difference. And so it's really important that people plug in and participate like that. I see another question popped up, so pardon me because they come quickly. So let me see, I've only got this much space to read your questions. Is ASA using Prop 215 as the main basis in creating these new bills? And that's a good question, and the answer is yes. to the extent that Proposition 215 gives us any guidance. Now, if you've read Proposition 215, it's about a half-page long. And what it does is it creates immunity for certain people for certain crimes in California. So that's really great. And so we also have in California SB 420, better known as the Medical Marijuana Program Act, which creates some additional rights and procedures and processes for medical cannabis. And so we're trying to preserve as much of that as possible as well. But our primary guidepost for medical cannabis in California are the points of unity. If you go to our website, americansforsafeaccess.org, or safeaccessnow.org, and Google, use the search box to Google points of unity on our website, you'll find in the California section 11 principles that we have distilled from meeting face-to-face with our constituents. Early this year, Americans for Safe Access Executive Director Steph Scher and I toured the state of California, and we talked to stakeholders, sometimes in big groups and sometimes in small, about what they wanted to see in state regulations, and we distilled these 11 points of unity. Some of the high points are this: that medical cannabis regulation should facilitate access and not restrict it, that medical cannabis patients should not have to give up any rights for commercial regulation, that the cost associated with this should be reasonable. Those are the sorts of things that we heard from our constituents. And as a grassroots organization, we always go back to what the people at the base are saying. And so, yes, we're using Proposition 215. We're using the Medical Marijuana Program Act, SB 420, and we're using the direct face-to-face feedback that we got from our members all over the state of California about what they want to do in state legislation. I also want to remind folks about the Lobby Day, that based on your feedback from last year, that you also have things you want to say that may be different from what Americans for Safe Access wants to say. And on every single one of our fact sheets are the documents you take to lawmakers about the bills. This is the one for AB 266. On every single sheet, we're going to have a space for your comments. I don't know if you can see this on the screen right now, but every sheet has at the bottom a place where you can write your own personal comments and include your contact information so that you can be a part of that conversation with your lawmakers. Because reasonable people often disagree about details or priorities. And I want you to have a chance to have your voice heard individually when you sit down with your lawmakers. So when you come to Lobby Day, you're going to get the tools you need to make that happen. So I want to make a last call for questions or comments. We've been on almost 40 minutes now. So if there's anyone else out there just itching to say something or ask something, this is the time to do it. And I want to, at this closing point of the conversation, just mention to you that Americans for Safe Access started off right here in California as a grassroots organization. And our goal back in 2002 was just to shine a national media spotlight on the federal interference and intimidation that was happening in California. And we thought that would be a simple task. And here we are in 2015, still working to change and to harmonize federal law. We've had some huge victories at the federal level that are very important here in California. Twice now, Congress has voted to restrict federal funding for federal interference in medical cannabis states. There are bills pending, like the CARES Act in Congress right now, that would ultimately harmonize federal law with state law. And so while we're working very hard at the state level to get things in order here in California, remember that there are both local, state, and federal campaigns for safe access. And you need to be participating in all of those. And one of the best ways that you can participate is to join Americans for Safe Access. Many of you who are listening right now are members. Thank you for your membership. If you have never joined, please go to our website and join today. It's really, really important, not just because it gives us the resources to do our work, but because also it helps us show lawmakers all over the country, here in California and in Washington, D.C. and everywhere else, that many, many, many people across the United States support the effort to reform and to protect medical cannabis laws. And that really makes a huge difference. It's one man speaking to Congress is one thing. 50,000 of us speaking together is an entirely different thing. And so get on board and join Americans for Safe Access. Now, I don't see any more comments popping up. So if you're typing, type quickly and press enter because we're about to wrap up. But I want to say thank you for joining us. Get in there to the California Citizen Lobby Day. And if you can't do it, participate from home when you get that email on Monday, June the 15th. And I'm looking forward to seeing many of you here in Sacramento to be a part of what I really believe is a historic and strategic moment in the state legislature. Thank you, Yami and Rich, for joining me tonight for this live broadcast. And seeing nothing else in the comment box, I'm going to say thank you so much for joining me. I will look forward to seeing you in Sacramento, and have a great night. Good night, everybody.